in a video fashion, and as the notice just went out and as the announcement was just made, we are recording this meeting. If anybody doesn't want their likeness to be recorded, they would have to turn off their video. Please do that if you don't want your the visual capture. It will be part of a public record. Just to read our mission, the mission of the Chuckanut Community Forest Park District is to ensure that the entirety of the property is protected in perpetuity and public ownership with respect to its ecological, recreational, and educational functions, and to serve as a fiscal mechanism through which the district, by a tax levy, will repay the city of Bellingham for the Greenlands Endowment Fund loan. I think everybody's got that memorized by now, even our guests probably. Having called the meeting to order, I'd like to take the roll call. I'm Frank James, I'm president. John Hymas. I see you there, John. John Brown.
Here.
John's there. Hugh Beatty.
Here.
I see you too. And then John McLaughlin, I don't think he's yet joined us. He does intend to join us. So I will keep an eye out for him when he shows up. If I don't see him, when somebody brought to our attention so our minutes can reflect that John was here. He has some work products that we'll be looking at. We have a quorum. I'd like a motion to approve our agenda, if people had a chance to look at that.
So moved.
There's a motion. Do I hear a second? Take your time. It's fine to look it over for a minute. It's a relatively straightforward agenda with lots of attachments. Do I hear a second for adopting the agenda?
May I say that I don't see an item here, Frank, regarding the signing of a contract or a discussion with Herrera.
It's under old business consultant agreement and any updates.
Yeah, it's there. It's there. Yeah. It's the first item under old business, John. Yeah. And we do have a draft to look at of that as well.
Thank you.
Did you say that John Hymas seconded the motion?
Oh, I didn't. I'm sorry. So, John, thank you very much, John. One thing I'd ask everybody not to do is to use the, and I don't know if you've turned it off or not, but the chat box. In a public meeting, having the chat box.
You want me to turn it off? I can try and do that. I don't know if I can, but. I
think you should, because everything that goes on in the meeting should be public, and to have private discussions that people that don't have access to the chat wouldn't be able to see, I don't think is appropriate. I defer to our legal counsel about that. Bob, that's been the practice in other meetings that I've participated in. Is that something you'd recommend, or?
I think it's probably the best shape course. I don't know if it's legally required. I mean, when you're at a meeting, you can speak quietly to a neighbor, but without being part of the record. But it's virtual. I like the idea of not having a chat box here, so that's fine.
Great, thank you very much. It's been the practice in other meetings that I participate in. I think it's a wise one because it does provide, if anybody that calls in on the phone, for example, would not have access to it. I don't think we have anybody like that tonight, but that is an issue. I'd like to acknowledge that Bob Carmichael is here and Robin is here and supporting us in the secretary role and our legal counsel. We also have at least one guest, Sonia M. And at the beginning of all of our meetings, we ask if you would like to say anything, you're more than welcome to. We'd love to hear from you. And you have 3 minutes to talk if you like. Yes, Robin, did you have something?
Did we finish the agenda approval?
We didn't. I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right. We had a second, but not a vote. So we have is there any more discussion about the agenda? Any other items? Hearing none, I'll call the vote. All those raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Looks like we have unanimous consent. We don't yet have John McLaughlin joining us. Sonia, back to, I'm sorry, I saw you turned off and then you're turning on. So if you'd like to say anything you want, you have 3 minutes to do that. And please tell us or ask us whatever you'd like.
I'm mostly just observing tonight. I did see that there was some discussion about the tax levy maybe last time, but I missed the meeting. So I was just hoping if there's more discussion on that I could catch it. I'm in the taxing district, so just curious what that's going to mean for me.
I think that it's already passed and a fact. So I think I don't think there's any more discussion about it.
Okay, which level of taxation passed?
The
4.6 cents per $1,000 of assessed value.
Okay,
So, like if you had a house that was around 300,000, it would go down and you'd save about $70 or so.
okay, and then so the total that's going to be raised is how much in 2022 to 23?
Not very much. I don't remember that.
Around $150,000, I believe, we
Okay.
approved.
Okay, thank you.
it's in our minutes and it's in you can find it on our website, but it went down to a small fraction of what it has been for the past 10 years.
Okay,
So it's a
great.
lot less, if that's good news.
Thanks.
Great. Anything else that you'd like to say? Vince?
Yeah, I'd like to ask, since I didn't see it on the agenda, but maybe it's part of John McLaughlin's presentation. But did anybody walk the forest after the big rainstorms and flooding? And did anyone do an assessment if there was any flood damage? Because the county wanted to know even if there was no damage. And I'm sure the Parks Department did it, but I thought maybe we as an entity should have also.
You brought this to my attention, and I'm sorry I did not walk the forest. I brought it to the attention of Michael Chiverio, who walks the forest often, and he
Yeah.
said that he would do it. When I saw him the last time, when I talked to him again, he didn't mention anything. I'm sorry I can't be more vague, more
Well,
specific.
yeah, I think we should file something, even though the deadline was the 6th. So I think that was Monday, but also just to document that we are a sink, that the forest did not suffer damage because the forest is a forest, and that it reinforces our need to save it, to preserve it.
Vince, I did walk through and I didn't see any major damage at all.
Yeah.
There was, of course, some very significant damage in Chuckanut Village. As you may know, the bridge dammed up there, and there was pretty extensive flooding of a number of the homes there.
Mhm.
And the bridge was actually destroyed going in, and there were homes that had no fire or ambulance or police service for a number of days. And it's now been replaced. I don't think it's fully functional yet. And some of the things from upstream did come downstream. So they did come, but I think they mostly came from the Arroyo Park area. There were whole trees that came down and hit the bridge there and dammed it up. And the community there is kind of pulled together and had to relocate mailboxes and a bunch of things. I think, if anything, the work that was done on Hogue Creek with that very large culvert may have prevented a much worse damage in that large culvert allowed for drainage. The old one was only, I think, 8 inches across and would almost certainly have been blocked and may have dammed up behind the road and could have washed the entire Chuckanut out. That happened, of course, with Chuckanut Creek in the past. But so I'm really grateful that large culvert was put in and prevented that kind of damming up on the upside of I don't know how many of you are familiar with where Hogue Creek goes under Chuckanut, but it could easily have dammed up and saturated and washed out and made what was a bad situation much worse. So I think.
Well, I think we should document, though, what happened in our 82 acres.
Yeah.
It's not too late.
I think, yeah, it'd take a systematic walkthrough. I walked through on one of the main trails and I didn't see any damage, but I didn't look everywhere.
Yeah,
There
no,
is
but I
the
mean, there's a county report that needs to be.
file.
boxed. Yeah,
Okay,
I emailed you guys that a couple weeks ago.
yeah. Is anyone free to do that? I mean, I walked through once, but I think to really file a report, we'd need to have a systematic effort at going through the park and looking at all the parts of it.
I will do this. I will do this. I should have done it before. I will look at the report, which is some pages, and I will proceed with trying to get a report filed.
John, I didn't go over where those bike trails are, the new bike trails, down towards the Beaver Pond on the south, excuse me, the southeast corner. And where the trails were there, that's disturbed soil and it might have eroded significantly there. I didn't get down to that part. So that would be worth looking at. Hello, John McLaughlin. John just showed up. We should let our minutes reflect that at 6:14, John McLaughlin joined us.
And maybe he's walked there since,
I let him in. I think. Hi,
So did
John.
I. We
Okay.
both did.
Great. So John, we've approved the agenda and we had some public testimony, a little, and we're still in the public testimony phase, and then we'll be looking at approving the minutes from our last meeting as our next item to get you contextualized.
Thank you.
Welcome. Are there other, I think that the public comment, I think from both Sonia and from Mensa, is there, I don't see anyone else. So maybe we'll close the public comment period. Mensa, if there isn't anything else. Okay, great. Thank you. And thank you for drawing that to our attention too. And thank you, John Brown, for volunteering to go and do that survey and draft a report to the county. I would like to turn to our prior minutes. If people had a chance to look at them, they are long, they are detailed. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes from November 10th?
I've looked at them and they are exhaustive. They make excellent reading. Points made by Mr. Geyer and I'm sorry, I don't recall his name. That's all. And our discussion of the levy, it was exhaustive and it goes on for pages. And Robin, it's quite an education reading those. So I move that we approve them. I make a motion that we approve of the minutes.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second that.
Is it a second by John? And then is there any further discussion? Is there any other corrections or additions or deletions that get this up to perfection? Kurt Golden was the other person, John, who made quite extensive comments. Hearing none, I guess I'll call the question. Do I hear for approval of the minutes of November 10th?
I vote aye.
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 Aye. That's three. John McLaughlin, I didn't catch your, did you vote?
I voted aye.
Okay, great, good. And Hugh, yeah, great. So unanimously passes. So those minutes are now will be put on in the public domain. So our next business is really to look at the Park Advisory Board meeting report. John Hymas, were you able to attend that, or is there any report from it, or the minutes are still way late still?
No, I wasn't able to attend, and I assumed that we would have somebody from Parks at this meeting. So, yeah, no idea.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
One departure here. There is someone else on the phone. It just says Denise's phone, but Dennis's phone. I'm sorry. Excuse me. I'm trying to do three things at once. Dennis, if there's, we're a little past the public comments period, but not very far past it. We do offer 3 minutes to anybody that'd like to make a comment. If you'd like to comment, please feel free to do so. We are recording the minutes, so if you do turn on the video, then your image would be there. On a phone, that's not likely, but possible, I guess. If you'd like to have a few minutes to ask questions or make a comment, we'd be happy to hear from you.
Well, thank you for the invitation. I'd just like to observe at this moment. I've heard about these meetings and remember when the work was done to secure the property. So I just kind of wanted to get an update, and I think I can get that best by just kind of listening and not asking questions right now.
Well, thank you for participating, Dennis. You're
You
very
bet.
welcome to attend, and I'll then formally close the public comment period. We'll move on to old business now. The consultants agreement and any updates. Bob, Carmichael, I think you've been working diligently, and I saw various drafts. Would you like to give us an update about where we're at with the agreement and the scope and working with Chris Webb and his team?
We received the base agreement from Herrera a while back, which I reviewed and made some comments on. And all the comments that I requested, they said fine to making those changes. There weren't that many. So the base contract, I think, is fairly straightforward. I had contacted Chris Webb last week and suggested that if he could get us a draft scope of work before this meeting, that would be very helpful, because that's probably the most important feature of the agreement, given that the rest of it is more or less standard language, other than it will contain the $30,000 limitation on the entirety of the project. I did receive something this afternoon from Chris and forwarded it on. It's part of the packet.
If you look at draft scope, I think is the title for it, and it should have been in the packet in the email that you received.
It's in the email received this afternoon. Yes, it wasn't in an earlier email, unfortunately, but and I sent it separately by email to all of you, and then Robin included it as well in the email for the meeting. So I don't know if you've had a chance to look at it or not. It is in the vein of a stewardship plan, which would result in looking at at identified background data as the first step. The second step, getting the project started, meeting with the Board of Commissioners to finalize the goals of the stewardship plan, and then getting into the details of an ecological and hydrological analysis. That's task 3. He describes what he would be doing there, and then doing an analysis of the restoration and conservation potential of the property, and finally bringing it together into a stewardship plan. I have not had an opportunity to actually talk with Chris about this. As I said, I just got it this afternoon. What I've been hoping was that we could take a vote on the contract and authorize the president to sign it on behalf of the board at tonight's meeting, so that Chris can get going. But that depends, given that you haven't really had time to look at this and some of the board members may want to digest it. That's entirely in your realm and your prerogative as to whether you want to approve it tonight. You could, if you did decide you wanted to approve it more as the scope is written, the motion would be something like approving the Herrera contract subject to the additional changes in my email to Teresa Wood of December 2nd, and and the scope of work would be incorporated then from Webb's email this afternoon. And if there's any questions, I can try to answer them. But again, I haven't had a conversation with Chris where we talked about a number of these things, but I haven't talked with them after had a chance to ask him questions about the scope of work from this afternoon. So that's really where things stand. And I would get back to the board for further discussion or questions.
Thanks, Bob. Some of the things in it are going to be that it's an effort to kind of rationalize and coordinate with a couple of other things, both the effort that we're doing, but also the master plan, its project itself, and also the urban forestry management plan, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes. Again, some of the things that John has drafted up a letter that we've asked him to draft about John McLaughlin, about where we think that urban forestry management plan may have shortcomings. But this would incorporated into this scope of work would be the kind of making this plan be parallel with and consistent with the urban forestry management plan, as well as the master plan that for the property itself. I think those are wise and prudent things to do. I don't know how many of you got to look at the information that I sent out after our meeting of the steering committee with the community members and with the city. There is an interest on the city's part, I think, to have us do some of the work, fund some of the work after the park master plan is completed. And I think that's going to be one thing we should talk about this evening. If that's really the scope, that wasn't what we envisioned, and it isn't, I think, currently part of the scope. I don't think it's terribly appropriate myself, but I think we really need to have a discussion about this ourselves to give some feedback to the city if we're willing to do that. What they were looking for, I think, was some additional help with some assessment after the master plan is completed. And I think at least my interpretation of what we approved so far was to really get as robust a level as we can of the things that we believe the city didn't have adequate resources for in the master planning process itself, which will really be reflecting on the things. And I think Chris's scope looks pretty carefully at those issues and labels them a kind of a stewardship plan development that would look at restoration, conservation, and preservation of the parcel. But other people were in those meetings and other people have read this document. I'd like to open it for a more full discussion.
May I say, Frank, I think you presented that very well. I have looked over this scope, and without being too specific about it, the way in which Bob has explained it going through the various tasks, I am mindful of what Nicole said at the last steering committee meeting. She said that she hoped that Herrera's scope would include the issue of the main road bed, the question of it being too close to one of the wetlands. It seems, and she also mentioned the parking at the entrances. She hoped that Herrera's report would complement what the city was putting together. I'm trying to say overall is that it seems to me that the document, as I read it, is sufficiently flexible and not without being vague in its terms, that it's comprehensive enough in its terms for us to approve it tonight, and simply to urge Herrera as we go along to work in close consultation with us on the urban forestry plan letter, that these things will naturally become part of his concern. That the whole document of the scope of the work is sufficiently loose to include a number of other things to be included. we're not adding to his work. We're just filling in a little bit more specifically as we go along, what he has laid out. And I think I feel safe in approving this document as it stands. He seems like a reasonable fellow, and we can put in more things, and he can complain about it or take them out, or just find himself naturally doing them in the course of doing it. So I make a motion that we approve it, if that's appropriate at this time.
Well, I haven't discussed anything yet, but
There's probably more room for discussion, sure.
I read through it, and I remember at the combined meeting where there was some discussion about it was going to be a sort of a history of the area and the extractions of gravel and logging and various things that had happened to the site over the years. And I thought that was going to be part of the research. I didn't.
That
see
is
it.
going to be part of what Lane Potter has put forward in the outline. There is a section having to do with the history of the property.
So we're going to depend on Lane to do it, not Webb. Is that?
But we can
No,
certainly
we
ask
aren't going
Chris to
to do
review
that.
it,
We're
for
going to
sure.
Lane herself is going to draw on documents that we've produced.
Oh, okay. So we have to produce the history then.
Yeah. Can I make a comment, please?
Sure, and so please.
Well, Lane is in a better position because she has city resources for the history. And then also we have the history in Ann Isinger's baseline study.
Right.
So there's pages and pages of history already in print. But for this, I think if Lane can do the use the resources of the city, that's to our benefit.
Yeah.
And Anne has very generously volunteered to help whoever we selected, either of the parties we considered, she would review and assist on a voluntary basis, which I thought was very generous of her. She has probably one of the greatest depths of knowledge of this parcel of any of them. And that's something that's recognized in the scope in task 3, that Anne would be a resource for looking at the underlying ecology of the site. And then so I think you're exactly right, that I think we could have Herrera review that information and perhaps include it in what they do once it's reviewed. I think letting the city initiate that would be a wise thing to do in terms of resource allocation. But other people with comments, Hugh, did you get everything said you wanted to say?
Yeah.
Great.
May I add one more thing, Frank? On page 3 of that draft, Chris does say under task 4, he does say, as appropriate, the analysis that he will conduct will identify opportunities to coordinate with parallel planning efforts, such as the urban forestry management plan and the park master plan.
Mhm.
I think his framework of understanding of all of the components, it seems to me is loose, and I just feel very safe with this guy.
Other people have comments? John McLaughlin?
I agree with John Brown and certainly support his motion. I would note that it's a combination of task 4 and 5, that this group has produced a set of restoration priorities. And so we already have considerably more detail than is in the scope of work regarding where to go in the future for restoring some of the conditions that the conservation isn't supposed to protect and that we certainly want to maintain. So I think we've got already more detail than is in the scope of work. And I think we're probably fine with the scope of work as written. If we wanted, we already have, we could refine it further.
John, do you think it'd be beneficial? Could you find the time, do you think, to sit down with Chris and provide him some of the kind of point him in the right directions to go on where those materials are at?
Probably the first step would be just to send him the restoration priorities document, have him read that and then confer with him and see what he thinks.
I can do that.
Okay.
That's easy.
Yes. A lot.
If you could take that on as a task to send it to him and then be available, because John, honestly, you understand these issues better than I think most of us. And I think it might be beneficial to get that
Sure.
kind of high level of understanding so that he could,
Sure.
you're a quick study, he's a quick study. I think you'd make quick work of it.
It's a lot of work, but the actual doing the work, the scoping it out could be pretty quick.
Yeah. He's got a good team. I don't know if you had a chance to look at the other people on the team that are joining him. They're people with real skills and experience and extensive work with the city. So I think I think it's a very promising situation we're in for moving things forward and really focusing on some of the things that I think wouldn't have been done that we can support to really bring to full fruition as good as we can. So thanks for that comment, John. Other people? Anybody else?
Ask, wasn't he going to be here tonight or not?
I thought that he was. I don't, and I don't know why he's not actually.
Do you want me to call him? See if he can come?
To see, that'd be great. Yeah.
Okay.
Did we send him the materials for the meeting?
I didn't send him anything, but
Okay.
he has the scope of work and the proposal, right?
Yeah.
Bob?
Yeah.
So, but before we bother him and take up his time, is there anything that we need from him at this meeting tonight? Or
Well, I think he might want the opportunity to walk through this plan with us to make sure that he understands it, our needs. I apologize. I didn't. So maybe, Robin, if you could send him this, or I'll send him the email that we got so he has it. And then if you would try to contact him, that'd be great while we continue on with our meeting. Is that a good
Yeah.
plan? Okay.
Yeah.
So where we're at is we have a motion from John Brown to approve this scope and to continue to work with them in developing it. Is there a second or further discussion at this point?
Could I clarify that motion? So would that motion
Please do.
include approval of the scope and the contract along with the changes I suggested in my email of December 2nd to Herrera?
Thank you.
Good.
Yeah, that's a welcome addition. The scope that we have here is just one component of the agreement, and Bob has worked diligently with the contracts person for Herrera and have come up with an agreeable set of issues that are both in an email and in a document that I think I've reviewed, and I think they would protect our interests and clarify our relationship in a way that would be very helpful. Attached to that would be this scope of work that would say what the actual work is, and that we would expect from them, along with the scope, a budget to go with it. That would be less than $30,000 or $30,000 on less. So maybe I muddied the waters instead of clarified them, Bob. But so
Oh, I think you did. I mean, John Brown, if you would say that your motion includes what I said and what Frank just said, that would be a pretty good comprehensive motion.
Thanks a lot, Doctor. I will try. But before I do, may I say that it was very beneficial, and I think it's positive news for all of us that Chris was at the steering committee meeting, and he spoke with Nicole. He spoke with all of us, and he knows that part of his one of the key things he's going to do is to work with the city on the master plan. So I make a motion that we approve this scope of work as revised by Dr.
We've lost your audio, John.
a meeting right now. I'll be down in a few minutes. Go ahead without me. Your audio is still gone, John. We can't hear you.
Yeah,
Well, there you're back.
Somebody else will have to try to make the motion.
No,
Mike?
you're there, John. It's
Now
working.
you're there.
Okay, I make a motion that, that we approve the scope of the work coming from Harara along with, including the revisions worked out between our council and Harara.
To the underlying contract and including a budget.
The scope to the, as addition to the underlying contract and within the budget that we have of $30,000 or less.
Yes, and I think they would set out a budget in the document as well.
And that we expect Harara to set out a document of his own budget as well. Did you get that, Robin?
You're muted, Robin.
Robin, are you talking to Chris on the phone or are you talking to us?
No, I was trying to talk to you. I
Okay.
was sending him an email. I left him a message. I think I couldn't understand the message. Anyway, it's saved here on the Zoom, so I will have the motion. It's not in my head right now, but I will. And it's recorded, so.
Let me take a crack at it, if that's okay. John, with your permission, could I try to?
Please do.
it? So I see basically three components that we're approving. First is the scope as drafted by Herrera and as modified by the clarifications that John McLaughlin will make with Herrera in terms of the details of the scope. The second thing is asking Herrera to include a budget that will be less than $30,000, $30,000 or less. And third, that this scope will be appended to the contract, which has been drafted by Bob and the contract officer for Herrera, which we have all seen. And those three things would be the components as I see them. Is that a fair summary, John? Thank you. Bob, is that adequate for your purposes?
I think so.
Okay, great. And so if that's good enough, I think we could then consider a second to the motion that we approve that.
I'll second.
There we go. John Hymas seconds. Is there further discussion? Are we ready to vote on it? Hearing none, I'd like to call the question. All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
It looks like a unanimous vote. Are there any abstentions? Is there any nay votes? Great. So passes unanimously.
So Frank, to clarify, I'm going to confer with Chris Webb, and we're actually going to clarify or expand, complete the scope of work.
Yeah, exactly. To include the documents that we've already done, which he may not actually be aware of. I mean, if you could simply share that document with him and
Sure.
show him what's there. I don't think it's, I think it will enhance and improve his effort by sharing with him some of the work we've already done, which you may not be aware of. So thank you, John.
All right, he does note task one, he needs the link for our restoration priorities, the one we were already talking about. There's also a master plan outline, and it looks like he's referring to the one that we created as opposed to the one the steering committee has.
I think he was thinking of the steering committee one when he made that comment. Because I sent, that was part of our, with the RFQ, that's what went out labeled that way. So I believe that's probably actually the cities and the steering committees outline.
They do differ.
They do differ, and we are free to use whichever one we want. But I think that's another thing you might clarify with him, is that here are the additional things that we value. Yeah.
Great.
But with those clarifications, then I think we have approved the scope and the basic contracting process, and we've already approved the budget. So I think we're good to go there. Any other? I'm sorry, I just closed my agenda. I've got to open it up again.
Do we want to mention anything about when we had the noxious weed woman here from Whatcom County? Because it seemed like she had some documents and information about noxious weeds for us.
I actually have a copy of a screenshot of the map that she provided with us that I keep on my desktop just so I don't lose it. And you may recall that that document is not something that is designed to be shared. It's actually a living document that they kind of keep tabs on so that people don't misuse the information, I guess. But I think having maybe the minutes of that meeting included or portions of it relative to the noxious weeds, I think is a useful thing. And I think the basic conclusion that should be included is that she shared with us was that basically this property is in very good shape with respect to noxious weeds. There are noxious weeds there, but the bulk of the forest is very intact. I think she said something to that effect. And the noxious weeds are focal. They are in small focused areas that she thought could be manageably handled. I think I'm paraphrasing the conclusion there, but I think that information would be wise, and the information that they have in their maps would be wise to be part of the planning process.
Right, that confers with my experience too. The concern is have conditions, impacted soils and disturbed areas that are suitable for invasion of many invasive species. And the sooner we restore those conditions, the easier it's going to be.
That's a really good point, John. And I think that would be something perhaps we could talk with him about, is that these bicycle trails, and indeed, not just the newest ones, but the oldest ones, still offer an opportunity for invasive species to get into this forest. And the other thing, just to clarify, is that the city intends, I believe, to have the main trail through the forest be the old roadbed. And the old roadbed, if I understand correctly, comes very near or even crosses wetland territory. And some restoration and planning and hydrology is important. If that's going to be the trail plan, then there really has to be some consideration given to the ecologic impacts where it crosses through wetland and sensitive areas.
Yeah, depending on which parts of the roadbed you're talking about, it does cross wetlands in at least a couple different places, and it interferes or impedes both surface and subsurface flows. And so there needs to be something done about both of those.
Yeah, I raised that issue when the city brought that idea forward, and as forcefully as I could. But I think that's another consideration that needs to be given. I think the city is welcoming that, though. Actually, I think they want. That's what John said earlier. Was they want the hydrology of that road evaluated and the ecological impact evaluated. And if it needs to be moved, we should move it in the planning process. And the other thing that the city mentioned really explicitly is that they do want to improve the parking. And it's a discussion we've had before. We've discussed the safety of the current parking, and that especially along Chuckanut, which is very busy, and it is a limited site situation where it comes over the crest of the hill there. And so I think I interpret that to be that we're supportive of improving that parking for safety, and and the land that might be involved is land that is highly degraded already in terms of the ecological impact. With many, that's where the Scotch Room and other things have made really be nice to clean it up. A parking place might be better than what's there ecologically. But those were the two issues that John Brown brought up at the beginning of the meeting. And I think they're good issues for us to take forward as being concerns that should be considered and fully evaluated prior to completing the master plan. or as part of completing the master plan. Other comments about this issue? Hearing none, the data sharing agreement with the Washington State Auditor's Office. We need to discuss and vote the data sharing agreement and authorize its use. And I'll sign it if our decision is to move forward with that, which I think seems likely. Have people had a chance to evaluate that data sharing agreement? And Bob, did you want to say anything about the legalities of it? I think it's something we have to do, and it's something that I think we have a fairly clear path forward on. Mr. Carmichael?
I wouldn't go so far as to say we have to do it. The state auditor wants us to do it. And the path of least resistance is to do it. They'll keep bugging us until we sign it. And to me, the biggest factor in recommending the board sign it is to keep your legal fees down, because every time I touch this thing, it costs you money and it's just not worth it. The agreement that they've prepared, in my opinion, is deficient in a couple of respects. The biggest one being it doesn't have an indemnification clause in it to protect the district, but I believe the risk is so minor here that and I don't think we have confidential data that is likely to be breached. So I really think it's best just to go ahead and approve it and move on.
Could I make?
I think that's in line with our prior discussions. I remember we discussed this before. So I think that's John Brown. Were you going to make a
Could I
motion?
make a motion that we simply approve this? If Mr. Carmichael says that we should, and it's going to save us money down the road, it seems to me, I said this a long time ago, and so did the rest of you, that it doesn't need to be done. In fact, Mr. Carmichael said that he wasn't sure if it needed to be done, and we're going to be out of business in a year or so anyway. But just to save ourselves costs, let's get it. Let's approve. I make a motion to approve it.
John Brown has moved, and Hugh, was that you that seconded?
Yes. I
Thanks.
second.
So John moved, John and Hugh seconded.
I
Any
also
further
say-
discussion? Yes,
Yeah,
Hugh?
the Insurance bill that we're paying anyway, so we're kind of insured anyway here.
All right, so there's a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
I
And lots of hands up there. Great. John, I didn't catch your, you voted aye too? Yeah, McLaughlin?
Yes, I did.
Great. I have to move the screen over so I can see, Thank you. So that again is a unanimous vote. Thank you very much. And we can move on to the next issue. Report from the steering committee on the master planning process. I did send out the minutes and the agenda of the earlier meetings at the conclusion of the last meeting. Happy to answer any questions about that or take any additional input or have comments from Vinca or John Brown to clarify things. To briefly summarize, I think they're currently planned for 2 more meetings. One, the next big event is going to be a public process to get input the city's going to run. A very passive process. It's going to be online, so it's going to be relatively passive. It will be the next major thing, and there'll be a meeting of the one more meeting of the steering committee then. And then once a final draft is produced, before it comes to us for review, it will go back to the steering committee for a final review. If I understood correctly, I think there are only 2 more meetings of the steering committee. One around the public involvement of public process, and the second about reviewing the final draft. I think there's pretty good consensus and alignment between the city and us, in my view. But I would be anxious to hear what John Brown and Vinca would have to say. And Hugh was also an observer there. So, but Vinca, John, Hugh, comments?
I will say just this, that you have expressed 2 concerns very, very well, and you made them at the last meeting too, that that we don't feel that enough time has been given to this entire process, and we don't feel that enough money from the city has been given to it. However, within the constraints that exist, there are there is great energy within that steering committee to do as much as they can, and a number of people are working with goodwill, and it was I think that we owe quite a vote of thanks to Frank for his superb vision of everything that is going on and juggling any number of balls at the same time. He spoke beautifully to everyone about the positive nature of the meeting, and I think that everyone is coming out of it with a lot of energy and a desire to do the right things. That's all.
Yeah, and I concur with that, even though I missed the last meeting. Sorry, I had a little medical emergency, but I'm pleased with the direction we're going, slowly but surely. So I don't have major concerns at this time, and I want to see what Herrera is going to help us with.
I think the difficult thing is really the timeline. I think it's still, at breakneck speed. And the city has had 10 years to do this. They don't like to talk about that.
I know.
And now to do it in just a few months. And there's a practical reason behind it. Their reason is that they don't want our taxing ability to detract from the likelihood of passing the greenways and other initiatives they have. And they also want to move on to other projects. And I respect and honor both those things. At the same time, this is our project. And I think if we feel that there needs to be more time, now is the only time we're going to have to ask for that. I think it's a very, my own assessment, I think it is a little on the unrealistically quick side. It's hard to believe we're going to get a finished product and public comment and legislative process done in the time frame that they envision. That's my thought about it. John McLaughlin, you've patiently waited your hand up.
Yeah, so Frank, you mentioned that in the document you sent us, the city had indicated some request for us to do additional work. And I can't see that in those documents. I wonder if you could share what that was. The documents you sent were two documents from the November meeting, and then just an agenda for the December 3rd meeting. But it didn't include what was actually requested of us.
What I think what Nicole saw was she wanted to clearly differentiate and make certain that we didn't think we were doing the master planning activity ourselves. And I think there's little fear of that. I don't think any of us have ever envisioned that we would actually do the master planning process. That's really the city's job. I think we're all clear about the civics. They did not allocate very much money. They allocated $25,000 total. 10,000 of that was allocated to having the facilitator that runs the meeting. It's a pretty hefty amount for that task. And then at least what I was told by Nicole was that the other $15,000 was going to be paid to that same consulting firm to do things like graphics, like sign design and brochures and things like that. And that was going to be the bulk of the expenditures that they make on the master planning process, and that the remaining work will be done by the city staff themselves.
Including Nicole.
Right. Oh, Nicole and absolutely. And Lane and other people that have been involved in the process. And the real question for us is, honestly, I expect more from the city. I expected more. I still expect more. I think that it would be nice if they put more effort into this planning process and took a longer time. One of the things they want back from us from this meeting is kind of an endorsement of their timeline and that approach. And I think this is our opportunity to say, that's okay with us, and that's what we want to go with, or, we think that's inadequate. I mean, that's really up to the group. It's hard for me as chair to, I mean, I have strong opinions about this and I'm trying not to inflict them on everybody. But so I really need to hear, we need to hear from each other what we believe, and then we need to go forward with that.
I did not hear anything said at that meeting about any expectation voiced that we would respond to the city's sense of a timeline. The city's sense of a timeline is that there will be an open house sometime perhaps in January. And then there will be other things that happen, finally a final steering committee to review the feedback. And that they anticipate, I have not heard anybody specify date certain about this, that they anticipate that the whole process will be wrapped up before summer. But I didn't hear from the steering committee or from park staff or from Nicole. I didn't hear an expectation that we would come up with a timeline or that we would respond to their sense of a timeline. Did you hear that?
They were specifically looking for feedback from us about the timeline and agenda. That's what I heard.
Okay.
And so the real question is, I think they plan on finishing this by June, by summer.
Yes.
And that puts some serious constraints on what can be done, even by the consultant we've chosen to work with. That's a pretty constricted amount of time. And specifically what they asked that I thought was unusual and odd was that they wanted the Herrera group to work on kind of the implementation plan, not on the planning document, but actually doing some of the technical work around how the trails would be constructed, rather than where the trails should be and how we can plan for those trails. So I think they were looking pretty explicitly to use some of that resource in work that typically would fall to the city in this process, in terms of trail design and construction and permitting and all those kinds of things. Now, maybe I misunderstood. Minsa, you were there. Did you have oh, you weren't at the last meeting.
Well, I wasn't at the last one, but my comment would be that we can't really know for sure what kind of roadblocks that the Herrera group might or might not encounter, if any. And maybe it'll all go smoothly because there's a lot of work that's already been done and all they'll do is put it all together and digest it, and and maybe it will be just fine. But I can't swear to that. I mean, I don't know for sure that that's the way it's going to go.
The city overall, Vince and Frank, I don't know if you agree with this, Hugh, but the city was a bit in the dark about how Herrera was going to be involved in this process. They are very happy to have him involved. They've worked with him before. They like him. He likes them, but they don't know specifically what he's going to do. Now we have approved the scope of the work, and that will be in the city's hands. Presumably there will be some communication between Herrera and the city. And I think that they will feel more liberated and loosened up and know where their energy should go and where they are going to suggest that Herrera's energies might go. I think that these things, just in the course of events, that as it evolves, Herrera and Nicole have worked together before. Chris Webb and Herrera, they know each other. And the feelings.
John McLaughlin, yep. Sure. Done. Yeah. John McLaughlin, you again have patiently raised your hand. Please.
Two quick comments. First, you mentioned a timeline, and I'm wondering where that is. There's some mention of timeline in the December 3rd meeting agenda, but it doesn't have the details that you've been speaking to. So I wonder if we could find that out. And the second comment about if the city is wanting Herrera to do technical work on trail design or construction, that would be a great opportunity for us to influence that, so we don't end up with roads, as per the city parks department usual standards. So we could have influence to have trail designs or trail specifications that are more suitable to this place than what usually happens with city standards.
So
I
when
wish
we
John
had that,
McLaughlin- I wish John McLaughlin would bring that up with Herrera, and then Herrera can bring it up with the city.
yeah, we brought it up at the meeting, though. I brought it up, and we also brought up issues about timelines. So they're aware that one of at least my concerns personally as a steering committee member is that they have a trail standard for big wide trails, and there need to be standards for narrower, smaller trails that are more agile in terms of navigating the kind of space that we're talking about. And in respect to timeline, they also have accommodated to some extent the public process. They were expecting that to take place this month. And it really seemed unrealistic. And I think the steering committee, I suggested the steering committee confirmed that that timeline wasn't very realistic, that really
Correct.
having that public meeting was just premature in December. And so that's been put off to January. But the
Yes,
timeline is still, again, largely motivated by other demands on the city's time and a desire to take this kind of taxing piece out of the picture. So from their point of view, it would not threaten other initiatives they have that they want funding for, greenways and another major project that they're planning on trying to fund. And as sympathetic as I am to those causes, I think we need to look and say this is our last chance to have an impact on what the ultimate security of this parcel is going to be, how well it's going to be protected. This master plan is it. That and the conservation easement are the only opportunities we're going to have an impact on that. The conservation easement probably being the more important thing. And the city was not willing to negotiate that with us at this point. So there's quite a bit being shoved off into the future, and that future has a very abrupt, truncated, from my point of view, timeline. I would like to ask them for the amount of time it takes to naturally complete the process rather than a predetermined get it done by June approach.
I'm not sure they want to get it done by June. I just don't know when. I think it's obvious that their hope is that it will be done by June. It seems to me also, Frank, that the kinds of concerns you have will become clearer as we go along.
And that's fine with me. I
become
think,
more focused.
yeah, I just wanted to not let that issue not be a focus. I think I think we need to raise the issue. We don't need to resolve the issue from my point of view. I agree, John. I think as long as we raise the issue and make sure that we're clear that we expect prior to approval that the process really address conservation, restoration, preservation in ways that will really protect this property, including as ultimately reflected in the conservation easement, then I'm comfortable. I would be uncomfortable that if we just kind of rushed to meet a deadline due to other priorities. John McLaughlin, you've raised your hand again. I'll shut up and listen.
Frank, what you just said is really important. If you look at the last line on the December 3rd agenda, it's to notify the park district to dissolve as soon as the plan is approved. And so your comments about making sure that, restoration and all the other plans that you just mentioned are included in the plan is critical, because it's pretty clear they want us to go away as soon as that plan is approved.
Yes. And when we're gone, the only surviving legacy we have is the details of the conservation easement. And as currently written, it doesn't come close to protecting our interests. And the steering committee has been quite strong and has passed and approved of things that are entirely consistent with our vision of a future conservation agreement that very, 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 very close alignment, perfect alignment. But again, that steering committee has 2 more meetings and it's gone. So I think we just need to be mindful of that.
I wish that I had raised that at the last meeting, Frank. I wish that I had said, because it occurred to me that we're going to need more meetings of the steering committee. And with all respect, I think that we can raise that question at the next meeting. We can say we just need to meet more times. I wish I'd said that. That
Yeah,
the
I'm
steering
pretty sure too that we're gonna need to meet more than just,
Yeah, let's bring that up the next time we meet with them.
Steering committee is gonna stop meeting before the plan is done?
Well, no, there would be 1 more meeting around the public engagement time and a second meeting when the draft is done. And very specific times were mentioned. I don't know exactly, I don't recall exactly what the dates were, but it was, Lisa, do you remember what I think it was, yeah, so by 6/14, the plan outlining scope and timeframe would be completed. By 6/25,
Where are you reading that?
yeah, from
Yes,
the agenda from December 3rd meeting.
Right.
And by 7:30, the clarified goals with existing city data, and then with a view to an engagement process in September, and then moving forward to council, I believe in November.
Yeah.
Oh, no, that's 21, not 22. Just a second. Oh, they didn't write it down in the agenda, but they had a plan for moving, I think, the process through the legislative agenda by June to have it, done. And then once they envision, if I understand correctly, they envision moving the draft plan to the legislative agenda, to the legislative process at the same time as the revisions of the conservation easement, that those would go forward together to the
I have
city.
never heard them say that, Frank. I trust your recollection, but those were not things that I wrote down about specific times.
Then said, you weren't there. Or-
yeah, I think in the beginning, John, they said that. In one of the early first meetings, that by the time the steering committee had done all its public outreach and blah, 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 that the conservation easement would kind of be.
That's another thing we can bring up at the
negotiated
next meeting of the steering committee. We can try to pin them down on what they expect as dates and tell them why we think the dates are unrealistic, if we think that.
Yeah, but we don't, I don't think we need to worry about changing anything right now, because I think it's going to naturally flow and it'll get extended as it needs to get extended. I'm pretty sure.
I'm optimistic that way too. Of course, we may be wrong, but let's hope.
The way I look at it, if Chris could get his work pretty much done by spring, then they could have their open house in the early spring, let's say early April or April sometime, and then go through the legislative process and be ready by the fall equinox, or fall September, mid-September sometime, be done.
Well, Vincent and John both suggest that we can have input on this, and I trust your judgment about that, and I think we'll have to have our input about that, though.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
And I trust the steering committee a lot. There's really good people on the steering committee, and I think the goals of the steering committee are truly in line with the precise goals that we have. I think there's excellent alignment there. So I will trust the steering committee to do that.
What about this urban forestry letter that our man from Stanford has put forth? Our man from Stanford Is it Sanford or Stanford? It's one of these schools in California, isn't it?
Perhaps, maybe we could, we've had a report on the steering committee. If that's an adequate report, we can move on to the next issue, and that is the urban forestry plan letter by John McLaughlin. John, did you want to talk about that?
I hope the letter speaks for itself, but basically, the city, as you heard in September, the city is commencing a urban forest management plan. It's in 3 phases, and they are, I think, have completed the first phase, which is basically assembling documents and baseline information. And so Annalise Burns, calling herself or her operation basically the science arm for the city, presented 2 of the documents that they contracted with a consultant from Vancouver to do, the Diamond Head Consulting. And she presented basically results of those 2 reports. And when I wasn't at the meeting, but I did view the reporting of it, and two concerns immediately jumped out at me. And I have since gone back and through and read both documents in detail. And my initial concerns were confirmed, and I noticed a bunch of additional problems with those reports. And so I basically described them in the reports. Annalise presented or depicted Diamond Head as very reputable with a very good reputation, and I didn't find that in their reports. I found a bunch of very obvious errors. Maybe that's because the border closure didn't allow them to actually do site visits, but city staff should have recognized those errors. And frankly, neither report passed the smell test. And so I tried to mute that and describe these concerns in very respectful terms, but I'm very concerned that the city would be basing any plans on these documents, and they need to be corrected. And they affect us in that decisions, I mean, if they're basing their urban forestry management plan on the information in these reports, the information on both the forest stature and on wildlife are that inadequate, then any decisions, both what happens within Chuckanut Community Forest, but probably more likely would be what happens to lands around it that affect the connection of forest, of wildlife, of fungi, of water, of everything else associated, that does impact it. The forest is not an island, it is connected. Then decisions based on this erroneous information could impact the forest. And so I try to use, again, respectful but informed language to try and convince the city that they need to ground truth these documents and correct the errors.
Have people had a chance to read John's?
Yeah, I read it.
Great.
I looked at it.
Any additional thoughts from others?
How do you anticipate, John, the letter that we are all apparently supposed to sign? What becomes of this letter? It goes to everyone. It goes to the.
Well, John's letter has 14 major points, and I think that these are technical points. I think they're valid points. I think the question is really, and certainly sending this to Annalise, I think is a good thing to do. It also, I think, is going to say not just a comment about the urban forest plan, but how that plan might impact the place that we're responsible for. I think that's really where the rubber meets the road. And I think it's the first part of a more nuanced and complicated discussion with the city about what that means and what we expect. I believe that John's done a careful job and a thoughtful job and made a positive, there's criticism that just says this is terrible. And there's criticism that says, and here's how it could be better. And I think John's done a very good job of crafting a document that does say, this is how it could be better. I think it's a very reasonable kind of criticism.
What is the next step, Frank and
Well, it would
John?
be-
You, Frank, what's the next step? We all sign this?
Right. I would say we all signed it and we sent it to Annalise. I think the question is that and I would look to Bob Carmichael, if you could think about this, that's the right place to send it, is to Annalise, or should we CC it to the mayor, to the council?
It's CC to all of those people, Frank.
Yeah, he does have it copied to the mayor and the parks director and the council members. I think it'd be important to add the public works director to that list because he is Annalise's boss, as I understand it.
Okay.
Yeah, I saw all those. I just wanted to make sure that's what was our intention. Because in a way, this is kind of really, we are elected people. We are parallel to the county council and the mayor. They are our peers. And I think our speaking to them is the correct, I think that's the correct thing to do. But that's something we as a commissioners need to decide.
I make a motion that we sign the letter.
I actually, Frank just made a really good point. And I hadn't even thought of it myself. But as an elected board, it seems to me it would make more sense to send this to probably the chair of the city council, the president of the city council, which would be Hannah Stone, and then copy everybody that is copied already. That may require, doing that may require a slight alteration of the first paragraph. And you'd have to reference the presentation that Annalise Burns gave. And
John
would-
McLaughlin, would that be an acceptable approach from your point of view to modify your letter in that way and
Sure.
redirect
So,
it?
and again, thank you, Bob. I somehow neglected to put Hannah Stone on the CC list. So again, what you're saying is to send it to Annalise, to the Public Works Director, and then Hannah Stone?
I think that,
Yes, but
the proposal is to include all those people in the CCs, but to direct it to probably to the Public Works Director,
No.
or to the head of the city council.
Right, you address it to them and then CC everybody else.
Oh, yeah.
'Cause
The
that's-
question is, who do we send it to? And I think the civics of it would be that we're an elected body, we send it to the head of the elected body that we're dealing with. If I understand the civics right, I think Bob agreed with that.
I
So
do.
John-
I think that you could send it, probably the right place to send it would be well, actually, maybe you send it to two places as address it, because they're both elected officials. Burns is directly within administration under Public Works Department. I would send it to the mayor and to Hannah Stone as president of the city council.
I think that's the right civics, Bob. I agree with you. I think that we're elected people, they're elected people, that's where it should go.
And then, John, that would just require some modification to your first paragraph.
First paragraph or just?
Well, you're.
Yeah, got it. Gotcha. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
But CC to Annalise and the Public Works Director and all council members and all that.
Yes.
We want them to know directly. Yeah, we don't want them to be, we don't want to write just to their boss. We want it to be a public discussion.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And Hannah Stone is president of the city council, so I would send it to her and the mayor.
Right. So is she president or chair? I want to address her appropriately.
Well, that's a good question. I've heard her referred to as both. Either, I think either one. You could call it chair if you prefer.
And in January, there's going to be a few more people on it too, and Pinky will be gone. So
That's
So we
true.
were-
If you send this after January 1, you'll need to update it.
I'd like to get it out.
Yeah, good. So
I
let's
think we
keep the
should get it
list
out.
we've got.
So with the addition of Hannah Stone, right? And
Right.
then, great. And so as amended then, we have a motion to approve this. Is there, and did we get a second? I'm sorry, I've
I'll
lost track.
second it.
So Hugh is seconded. So are we prepared to further discuss? Do we want to vote on that? Hearing no further discussion, I'll call the question. All those in favor of signing and sending the letter, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Sounds like another unanimous vote. Thank you. Great. And thank you so much for that. I realize that's a huge amount of work, John McLaughlin, and I want to appreciate and honor and thank you for that. Thank you, my
Great
friend.
job, John.
Yeah,
I had no idea it was going to be this until I looked at the wildlife plan.
Well, it's also, I think, what we need to let the city know that these are our expectations for protecting the parcel that we're responsible for. And I think we need to say that.
So how do you want to deal with our signatures?
Well.
I could go around and get them from everybody. I'm fine to do that.
That's probably the best thing to do. I think we should actually have signatures. I don't think we should do electrons. Then the
Right,
only
so-
person I don't know how to find is you, John. So if you signed it and then took it to Robin, we would be in business. Because
I've been to John's house now, so I know where he lives.
So how about if I signed it, scanned it, and then emailed it to Robin?
That'll work.
I'll do that tonight.
Well, you
Lovely,
wanna-
thank you.
No, you want to give her an original piece of paper though. So she can take it around for the other guys.
I can print it, what he sends to me.
Yeah, but it won't have his original
I
signature.
won't have my original signature on it.
Yeah, you want original.
All right.
signatures.
All right, I'll modify it and email it to you, and then you can bring it around to all of us.
Well, you spelled
Super.
my first name wrong. Hue is my first name.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's all right. I was just gonna put a line through it and correct it anyway.
Is there other old business?
I just want to say one thing before we get to that. I know I'm just the attorney, but I was really impressed with this, John. And I know Frank already said it, but this is really a value that nobody else could do other than someone with your expertise. And for you basically donated your time, and I can tell you put a lot of time into this. It's a professional level, well-wrought, well-written critique that would have had to pay a lot of money to a private consultant to do this. You know,
Thanks. It's what I do professionally.
yeah, but you put a lot into this. And I just want to thank you myself. I haven't done that yet. And I'm impressed with this and I think it's wonderful.
And the impact goes far beyond just our community forest. This goes to the entire city and potentially for many, many years to come. So John, it's a critically important piece of work and thank you so much from all of us.
I mean, I think of John Hymas, and you see the big blank areas on the map. Trees there don't matter. We can just lose them.
yeah. Yeah.
John's the tree guy.
We're all tree guys.
We all love him. Some of us know how to, you're a tree doctor. Let me get that right.
Anyway, yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for taking us back there, Bob. New business. We have a bunch of fairly busy new business. I think we've lost all of our community members, so maybe we can, Robin, yes, you had your hand up?
I just wanted to bring this up as I'm thinking ahead to the next meeting. Do we want to start getting the Whatcom Land Trust, ask them to come to the next meeting or something? So I just wanted to bring that
I've
up.
already thought about that, and I was waiting until we got the scope done and as much clarity as we can about what it doesn't make a lot of sense to talk to them until we know that we've got something that we can take our draft of the conservation easement and we can say that the steering committee has endorsed all those elements, but that's what they're going to want to see. They're going to want to know what is it that they've got to defend. And until we have that, I don't think they're going to be in a position to move their own process forward, having talked to them about it. So we do, but we also need those things. That's what we need. That's the unfortunate part of the city not deciding to negotiate that earlier. And it's very much seems like they're just kind of keeping their options open, which leaves me uncomfortable. I would
wonder
to
Yeah, I wonder, Frank, if you would know the right time to do this, you and John Brown and Hugh, who have been attending the steering committee. I wonder if it might be worth raising that issue again with the city now that more time has passed and the steering committee seems to have become aligned with what our purposes are, and see, given that the master plan is going to draw out a little bit, perhaps, why not try to get this conservation easement revised now?
I had that discussion a couple of times now with Nicole, and she's taking the lead from Alan Mariner.
Yeah.
He appears to be the source of that reticence and somehow saying that it keeps the city's options most open. And indeed it does. I mean, it's a huge lever on us.
Yeah.
If they want us to move, that's the lever they got.
Mhm.
And but I think we can ask. Yeah, I think the more often we ask, probably the better.
You know, that can play the other way too. Not off topic, but when I was talking to Chris Webb, and this in his scope of work, which is broadly written, that this can inform, his work can inform the conservation easement. And when we get his work, we may end up deciding we want to ask for other things as amendments to the conservation easement, not just the elimination of the permitted items. Those were things that were low-hanging fruit, were pretty obvious to most of us and were easy to take out. Chris, and this is something you can talk with him, I imagine after we have the contract in place, he said he wants to meet with the board, so maybe he'll be able to meet with us at the next meeting. That'd be one of the questions we can ask him at the next meeting, how he sees his work interplaying with the potential amendment to the conservation easement.
For sure. Well, with that in mind, it sounds like there may be some strategic advantages to a delay.
Maybe.
I'm just glad we have a year once we're done to negotiate it, because it may take a year. They told me really explicitly this could take 9 months or a year just to get through they have a very formal process now for approving it. And they are our best hope of, I think, an excellent, our single best partner in this. They're who I believe our preferred partner should be. But, you know, we need to land them still. So let's go ahead and move forward then, if that's okay. Other issues with respect to old business?
Let's wrap it up.
Hearing and seeing none. So now we've got a bunch of fairly mundane things. If you don't mind, I'm going to speed through them, but the petty cash in WECU is $2,967. The treasury report for November, you can see the written items there. Basically, we received tax revenues of $47,619 and paid out $4,364 in operating expenses, and $222,036 is paid on our loan towards the city of Bellingham. And our current outstanding debt is $67,842. That's not very much money. We're strategically poised. And so we need a motion to approve the district payroll form. Those are informational items.
So moved.
Well, the information. So the motion here is to approve the district payroll input form. Robin Albro, 31.75 hours in November. Total gross, $793.75, not enough. Do I hear a motion in a second?
Moved.
Moved, seconded. John McLaughlin seconded. All those in favor, raise your right hand, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Great, thank you. Now we also have the consent agenda, which is a motion to approve the following payments. On November 15th, invoice 9651.6, Carmichael and Clark, $7,382, including a $500 discount. Thank you, Bob, for regular professional services. Payment November 30th, invoice for $29.01 for mileage from September, October, November to Robin Albro, our secretary, and noble and brave person that steers the streets and gets our signatures. Thank you, Robin.
Yeah.
November 17th, our insurance policy for $1,982. And then the last one, payment of November 30th, invoice to Robin Albo for $78.31 for ink, paper, stamps, and copies for 2021. So do I have a motion and a second to approve those things? Are there any motion and second?
I motion that we approve them.
John Brown moves. Who seconds?
I'll second.
We'll give it to Hugh. Hugh seconds. All those in favor? Further discussion?
I will discuss, isn't it ironic that we pay almost $2,000 for insurance, the Philadelphia Insurance Company, when we've got a state auditor looking at this, and we've got a county treasurer, and we've got our own elected leadership, and we've got all this oversight, and we still have to have this insurance policy too.
Out of state.
The irony is noted for the record. Can I call the question now or more discussion? Thanks, you. All those in favor, raise your right hand, say aye.
Aye.
Looks unanimous. Thank you, kind people. Reminder, Robin will send an email to 3 board members and we will respond. And that will be our signature essentially on approving these decisions we made this evening and for the consent agenda and payroll. And we'll get it back to her right away. Next meeting will be the 4th Wednesday of January, the 26th of January at 6 p.m., our usual time. And so far, it looks like in our usual fashion. Omicron is spreading quickly. I expect it to be a very difficult time in the next few months, and I don't think things are going to get better. They're going to get worse. So wear an N95 mask, keep distance, to be vaccinated, and be probably ready for the very worst part of this pandemic in the next month or so. Christmas is not going to treat us well.
I'm curious, Frank, is the Omicron variant as deadly as the Delta and the original?
It's probably about the same, maybe a little less. Typically, these viruses do evolve to be slightly less toxic, but let me tell you, that's not saying much. If you are unimmunized, you can die from this bug, even an attenuated one. And so the people that are going to get slammed by this are all the unimmunized people. And we have lots of them in Whatcom County. Our hospitals are currently at 103% of possible occupancy. On Monday, they were 105%. They dipped slightly below 100% recently, but that means
That's statewide or,
in here in Bellingham.
oh, okay.
Statewide, it's highly variable, but the big hospitals in the big cities fill up, and then they begin to shed people to places like Forks. Do you want to have your heart attack managed in Forks? I don't want to have mine managed in Forks. And so I think we're going to see a real crisis in healthcare where important things are rationed, like access to emergency rooms and access to surgery. And it's going to be a very difficult time. I'm preparing for San Juan County an order that basically requires people to be immunized, to go to restaurants, to go to bars, to go to public events, requirement for immunization. I'm anticipating being shot at. I'm getting out my Kevlar vest, but I don't know what else to do. People need to be strongly encouraged in the strongest possible way. And not out of their own, I mean, I don't care if people get immunized themselves, but they're not being immunized puts everybody else at risk.
Right.
That's a problem.
Yeah.
And I shouldn't be soapboxing on our public time with the recorder on.
I just
That's-
wish it could change some minds, you know,
Yeah.
it seems like we've been strongly encouraging everyone for a long time now, and we seem to have plateaued in the number of vaccinated people.
Yeah. The relevance is that I don't think our next meeting is going to be a public meeting. That's the only reason I brought it up.
Yeah,
think-
no, that's good to know.
Yeah. And probably not for the one after that too, but shortly after that, I think we're going to, get there.
Thanks, Frank.
Thank
We're,
you.
we're headed towards herd intelligence, even if we don't get herd immunity, right? Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
I officially adjourn our meeting at 7:40.
Merry Christmas to all. God bless. Okay, bye-bye.
John,
Happy holidays to
Happy
everybody.
holidays, everyone. Goodbye.
thank you. I
Right.
can't think of, I do want to tell you, I love all you guys, the work you're doing and the work, the accomplishments we're going to make. We're making a difference in this place. We're making a place in